In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to edit as you go. In other words, how to modify a path outline as you're in the process of creating it. I've gone ahead and saved my changes as modifiedspikes.ai, found inside the O9 Pen Tool folder. I'm going to zoom out here. This time around, we're going to go ahead and draw the spikes that surround the back of the animal's head. So I'm going to start down here. Armed with a pen tool, notice that. It's got an X next to it, the cursor does, meaning that we are going to draw a new path outline. And I'll just start clicking away here. Now, let's say I click like here. I still have the mouse button down. And I don't like this location for my anchor point one little bit. Now, what you do, if you want to move a point on the fly in Illustrator, you don't just start dragging, because if you drag, you're going to create these control handles that will add curvature to the path outline. And I'll show you how that works in an upcoming exercise, but not quite yet. So I'll go ahead and undo that modification right there. And notice, by the way, when I undo, this time Illustrator remembers that the previous point is selected. So because I'm still in the process of creating this path outline, Illustrator is a little smarter in its undo operations. It was when we were working with a closed path that I forgot which anchor point was selected. Anyway, notice my pen tool cursor has nothing next to it, meaning that the path outline is still active. So I could click once again in a totally aberrant location or to set a point. I still have my mouse button down. While you have your mouse button down, you can press and hold the space bar in order to move that point to a different location. This is a trick that works only in Illustrator, and it's a really awesome trick. In other words, it doesn't work in Photoshop. But it's really useful. It does work with the geometric shape tools. You may recall that you could press and hold the space bar while drawing with the ellipse tool, the rectangle tool to move the shape on the fly. And the idea here is exactly the same. So we're moving the anchor point on the fly as long as the space bar is down. Then I'll go ahead and release my mouse button, and then I'll release the space bar so that I return to the pen tool, because otherwise I'm going to see the hand tool. All right, now I'm going to click here and there and to set some more anchor points in my path outline like so. Now, let's say I pass up some points like this, and then I look back upon them and think, gosh, I wish I had held down that space bar in order to relocate them. Didn't occur to me at the time. How do I now move these points to a different location? Well, you press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac in order to access the last used arrow tool. And in my case, that's the wide arrow tool, which is a lucky thing. So I can go ahead and, with the Control or Command key down, move these anchor points to different locations. And let's go ahead and adjust the position of this guy as well. And then I'll release the Control key or the Command key in order to switch back to the pen tool. Again, there's no special ornament next to the pen tool cursor, so the path outline remains active like so. Now, let's say that you're not so fortunate and your last used arrow is the black arrow. So I'll press the V key in order to switch to the black arrow tool, and then I'll press the P key to switch back to the pen tool. And now if I press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac, I get the black arrow tool, which is of no use to me when I'm sitting here working away with my pen tool. Notice, for example, if I'm not paying attention and I think, you know what, I want to move this anchor point to a different location. I move the entire path outline and I go, oh, darn it. And then I press Control Z, Command Z on the Mac. And then I think, oh, what the heck? I guess that was in a decent position anyway. So I release the Control key or the Command key and I just start clicking away again, and notice Illustrator did not join this anchor point and this anchor point with a straight segment. And that's because by virtue of the fact that I dragged the path outline using the black arrow tool, I also deactivate it. So what kind of crazy pain in the neck is that? Well, we've got a couple of questions now outstanding here. One is, how do you reactivate that path? The other is, how do you switch between the black and white arrow tools on the fly when you're working with the pen tool? So I'll answer that first question first. That is, how do I reactivate the path? Notice, by the way, that one anchor point is active, the other two aren't. And there's a couple different ways to work here. One is I could just go ahead and delete this path, just get rid of this incipient path that I was creating by pressing the backspace key a couple of times, or the delete key a couple of times on the Mac. And the reason I did that a couple of times is the first backspace or delete gets rid of the active anchor point and goes ahead and selects all the other anchor points in that path. And the second backspace or delete gets rid of the rest of the path. All right, now what you do is you move your cursor. Notice the cursor has an X next to it, thereby telling me, hey, you're going to start a new path. Illustrator's way of talking to me. But notice if I move my cursor over an existing endpoint, then I see just a little slash next to my pen tool, and that's telling me that I'm going to activate this path and add to it. So just click on that anchor point, and then move your cursor to where you want to add the next anchor point. Notice that we no longer have an X next to the cursor, and click away in order to extend that path outline. Here's something else you can do, incidentally. I'll press and hold the Control key, Command key on the Mac, and drag this path to a different location. Oops, made a mistake. Control Z, Command Z on the Mac. I'm simulating a mistake, in other words. Once again, I'm going to spacebar drag a little bit in order to scroll my view. I'll press Control Shift A, Command Shift A on the Mac to deselect my path. All right, notice I've got an X next to my cursor. Click, click, click in order to start a new freeform polygon like so. What if I want to keep the work that I've done? After all, now I've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different anchor points. What if I want to connect this path to the previous path? What you need to do is first make sure that the current path is inactive. And it's currently active because my pen tool cursor does not have any special folder all next to it. So I need to press Control Shift A, Command Shift A on the Mac, in order to deselect and also deactivate that path outline. Notice I now have an X, thereby telling me that I can create a new point without connecting it to the old anchor point. And you need to do that because otherwise, the idea here is I'm going to click on this anchor point and then click on this one to connect them. However, if this guy was still active, then I would have created a line between this endpoint and this endpoint the second I clicked on him. And I'll click here on this endpoint in order to activate it. Notice my cursor gets a little backslash next to it. So click there, and then I'll click on this anchor point. Notice if you look carefully at my cursor, you can see that I have yet another symbol next to it. This time, it's a little anchor point with this tiny little segment running through it. And that tells me that I'm about to join the active open path with this open path right there. So I'll click, and the two paths are joined together. So few different ways to modify your path on the fly. I did leave a question outstanding, which is what in the world do you do about the fact that you're pressing the Control key or the Command key on a Mac and you get the black arrow tool? How do you switch those tools on the fly? Well, I'll tell you exactly how in the next exercise.